Hey guys, you're listening to the Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast, where we talk about uncaging your divinely gifted wild heart to be as free and expansive as you were born to be. My goal is to use our stories, guest interviews, and your questions to tease out what has been keeping your wild heart under wraps. I'm your host, Mielle Fox, and together we will shatter the myths of our old stories to set our wild heart free. So thanks for choosing you and showing up today. Ta-da. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast. I wish you guys had visual for this. You're only getting the audio version, but I am here today chatting with my friend Beth Turner, another amazing, energetic, intuitive, and advanced numerologist. She is magic beyond magic. And I'm so excited for today's conversation because, of course, we're going to talk about the untamed heart. Of course, we're going to talk energetics. But the big exciting piece is we're going to talk about a collaborative project that she is working on with some of my other fellow numerologist geek friends. And it is going to be spectacular. It is going to be a book coming out later this year that is probably the newest, I'm going to say the newest available text on numerology in decades and decades. So I'm so excited to share some of that and why it matters and how does it impact listening to your heart? How can you use the information to better your life? So without me taking all the thunder, I'm going to pass this over, introduce Beth. She's going to say, hey, and we're going to get rocking. So Beth, my friend, thank you for coming on.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, love it.
I'm just thrilled to be here. And I love the whole premise of this podcast. My heart is singing, it's dancing right now. Yeah.
It's fun.
Um,
So fun.
yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah. So thanks for having me.
absolutely. Tell us, how did you go from Beth before to Beth now? Because I will let the listeners know I met Beth through another mutual acquaintance, and it is so phenomenal to me how we meet who we need to meet, when we need to meet them. And even though I have several numerology friends, we all have our own filter and our own way of interpreting information and bringing those messages through to a client. And Beth has a very unique and special presentation in how she conveys information, and it's just phenomenal. So I'm so nosy. I want to
Thanks.
know. Tell us the
Well,
journey.
the journey. It's funny because I think about it. I always joke. I've always been a little out there. I've always been completely fascinated by anything unseen, by ghosts or near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences. Like I remember as a kid, I'd seek the show Unsolved Mysteries, the shows of the, you know, anything that is otherworldly. There is I've always had this knowing of there is so much more than we see. There is so much more than just this. And I had dabbled, I had talked to someone, and again, it's like you said, you always meet people for the right, at the right time, or someone says something, and I've been a big believer in if if something piques your interest, it is there for a reason, and you need to sniff it out. And so don't be afraid to go ask, but get curious, right? Get curious about anything that kind of just sparks something in you. So I was talking to a neighbor, she mentions numerology. So she starts, I start to look into it, I start Googling it. Next thing you know, I'm finding courses. I start to get this thirst, this incredible thirst, like I just want to know more. So I couldn't get enough information. I loved it and took my certification courses, and that's where I met a lot of the people that I'm surrounded with now that I know, and in that kind of world. And where I went with numerology, I come from a very practical, logical family, a family based on, achievement, and they're amazing. Their resume is amazing. And I've always been a little bit more nebulous, a little bit more out there. And so it's been uncomfortable for me to untuck a bit, untuck
Mm,
my crazy. And numerology was a safer bet. I was interested because it was like, numbers, they're real, right? Pythagoras, founding
real
father of
dude,
math.
right?
I can get behind this. I can study this. It's a little bit more tethered. It's a little bit more, I can, I don't know, I could sink my teeth into it and not feel like it's too out there. Because it's funny, I have this belief, but I still am one of the biggest skeptics. Like I love finding proof for things, which I've been working on. Anyways, I ramble. COVID hits. I feel like everybody who you talk to says this. COVID hits, and it's like the noise shuts, the noise, everything quiets. Your calendar clears up. All of a sudden, you've got time and space. And then you start thinking of things. Then you start thinking about, well, for me, my mortality really hit. The mortality of people that I love. I had to, I really struggled with this, yeah, saying goodbye and what happens, right? So I'd always had this interest, but then in COVID, during COVID, it was like the volume turned up on that. Well, 8 months into COVID, my husband gets diagnosed with cancer, came back again. And it was no big, I mean, it was a big deal, but it was like, oh, very treatable. We can do this. We went on chemo, and things took a turn. He did not, well, he responded very well to chemo, let's just say, and it almost killed him. And that was like very sobering, because I had experiences through that 3 month period where I couldn't I couldn't explain, but I knew things. I knew things were about to happen. I could predict, and I've got no medical training. I've got nothing. I've got none of that. And for some reason, I knew when things were going to turn. I knew when it patterns became very clear. And I'd already been studying numerology for a while. And numerology is all about patterns. It's all about, and for me, I'm very visual. So if I write things down, if I draw them out, if I see things. And so I had this calendar, and I would record his symptoms, and I would record things. And of course, patterns just pop out of the page. But that's when I guess I was really tested, and I really started to trust my intuition, because it did not let me down. My intuition basically saved my husband, got him to the hospital in the nick of time, twice within hours of things getting really bad. Like, it got very close. And so that was kind of a wake up call. Anyways, I'm all over the map. Yeah, I'm like,
No, you are
I
good,
think it
and
was
I'm
that
following you.
that was that was the tipping point. That was the tipping point where it was like, okay, I need to trust what comes in. And then it just snowballed into, I couldn't get enough. It was numerology. And then it was like, oh, Reiki. And then I'd be doing something, and all of a sudden colors would come up, and I'd equate colors with things. And it was like chakras. Okay, well, let's do Reiki. And then I've always been fascinated by death. And I had had a few experiences with my husband when it got really bad, that it was like, no, 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 there's a knowing. I can connect. I can communicate with that other side. I can I can get feedback, and I know I'm right. I know it. And so then I started studying mediumship. And it's it's funny, I in my family, because everybody's so, I guess, determined or motivated, and they're very studious, and they're very good with the system, and I've always struggled with it. I've always struggled with having to follow the life rules. But for some reason, I took this study, well, because I was so fascinated, I was completely dedicated like I've never been. and
And it's
consistent.
so easy, isn't it? When it lines up and it feels right, it's not hard work.
Right.
It's
And
just like, "I'm thirsty, let me drink water." You don't say to yourself, "I'm thirsty, let me drink water." Well, how much water, and what does it taste like, and where do I put it, and how do I get it in the glass, and how much is gonna be, how many glasses will I drink before I'm satiated, and you just say, "Hey, man, I'm thirsty, I need water," and there you go, and this is for me, when I
yes,
start to talk about this whole concept of the heart, how energy works, how the head heart alignment is so key, how it is both science and spirit and there is a bridge between the two, and accessing the bridge is not like you have to pay a toll to get to the other side. It's just, as you say, trusting and letting go and stopping the need to control. What does it need to look like? What does it need to be? How does it need to come through to me? And just saying, what would you have me hear? What would you have me feel? What would you have me say? How can I take the information that you need me to convey to whomever, the client, the doctor, your husband, whoever it is? And just when you say, I just know, that clear cognizance that you're describing, this is how I operate. People say to me, "Well, how do
mhm,
you know?" And I, most of the time, just say, "I can't tell you how I know. I can only tell you that I know." Because I can't actually
yes,
say, "Oh, well, it sounded like this and it looked like that." My clear
right,
cognizance shows up with it's the strength of the belief of the message that is so firm, there is no room for doubt about the message.
right. And it comes with
It's
a different
so
sensation.
yes, it just feels
Yes.
different. It sits differently in my body, it sits differently, and, like you, I am from a family of if you can't see it, feel it, touch it, and prove it with an equation, it doesn't exist. I'm the daughter of an engineer. I work in healthcare where you're trained, like, if it
Yeah.
doesn't look like this, it can't be that, all the things,
Yeah.
but yet, like you, I've always been a little outside the box, and which is fine. I'm happy outside the box, thanks. And that's where you grow, of course, is get out of the comfort zone and grow and be willing to be curious. And then also, I find, especially in mediumship, and I don't know that I would call myself a medium. I wouldn't say that because I don't necessarily tap in the way I see you tap in when we have conversations. But that willingness to accept and have the awareness that when you have the message and it feels in that way that you know to be true, that you go with it. And the more you continue to go with it
Yes.
and know that it's correct, the more it shows up. It's kind of like, training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it
Yeah.
gets. And I
Yeah.
love that you recognize this and you saved your husband's life. Hallelujah.
Well,
But
it was, I think it needed to be that drastic. I think I needed to have an experience that drastic for me to trust what I was getting, because I what's shocking to me and what has been through the unfolding of all of this is how much self-doubt I had been struggling with. And you can't really mess around with mediumship. Mediumship is not a party trick. It's not something you take lightly. It is you're dealing with grieving. You're dealing with heartache. The last thing you want to do is misinterpret. The last thing you want to do is rub salt in anyone's wound.
hmm,
And so it's something that I I studying it, it was just out of sheer interest. But then as soon as I started to see the comfort, the clarity, the yeah, the comfort that people got from the messages I received, it was like, this is really important. This is really helpful. And what's amazing is in every single reading that I do, there's always like a chicken soup for the soul message that I get. And it's always, of course, you're joking. You're like, of course, this came up right now. Of course, I needed to hear this too. But the perspective you get from someone on the other side, from spirit on the other side, is so helpful on so many levels.
So I'm going
And
to jump in.
it's,
It's
yeah,
true. And I'm going to validate exactly what you're saying for the listeners, and I'm going to share a little something something which you and I have talked about, and I don't always put this out there on the podcast, but I will. So, for listeners who may or may not know, I lost my brother in 2020 very acutely. It was at the beginning of COVID. No, he did not die from COVID, but he had an acute event, put him in the ICU, and from his situation, he was not able to recover. So, he passed away. My brother in human 3D life was a pretty funny guy some of the time, but an extremely tortured soul 99% of the time. And he had a very difficult human life here. His soul expression that I feel very strongly, and I know for a fact you have felt because of our conversation that
yeah,
we had,
yeah,
brings through a very different expression of the essence of my brother's soul, who in his non 3D version is so able to be 100% beholden to the love and energy and expansiveness of what and who his soul truly is. That was not something he was able to convey in his 3D path. And the messages, so of course, like every human being who has a sibling or a parent or a friend or a coworker who passes away, your human grieves terribly, and you seek the answers. You question why him, why her, why now, why this, why that, whatever. We all do it. It is grief, and it is stages of grief, and it comes and it goes in waves, and you think you're good and then you're not. And the reality is, when you lose someone, to me, you have now created a partnership for the remainder of your life on this earth, a companionship partnership with grief. And you've got to start to create a cohabitative event with grief
yeah,
that doesn't take you out,
yeah,
that doesn't take you
yeah,
down, and
yeah,
to have access to someone who can help you understand and receive clarity in the message through the mediumship, for some people, I feel is like an enormous gift that helps to kind of take the edginess off of how do I cope and deal with this grief. And
right,
it's a gift. It's a true gift. And what I also love about the way that you share your information is the way that you bring it through is so helpful to the client, because I come to it with my own filter, my own lens. What do I
right,
know? You obviously didn't know my brother in life, but you certainly were able
right,
to get a sense of what's he like through the
right.
mediumship chat that we had. And the clarity that was able to be offered to me has been invaluable. And so, for the
Oh,
listeners, I'm going to tell you right now, it ain't no bullshit. It's the real deal. If you find someone who is truly gifted in being the intuitive channel to bring a message through, it can be absolutely transformative to your remaining time here on earth, so that you're able to live life to the fullest, despite the fact you share your heart space with grief, because that's the reality of grief.
yeah.
So I
And none
thank
of us
you.
can get out of it.
Oh,
Well,
no.
it is such a pleasure. Like it's one of those things where we're all in. Like none of us are going to get out of life in the physical form without grief or loss. And so and we're all like none of us are getting out of this alive physically, right? And so it's one of those things where it's like we're all in. Let's just we might as well experience as much as we can. And so you touched on something before, which I thought was really interesting, was in regards to your brothers. We're born into these families, and there's these stories created. I am Beth. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am the youngest. I am the and I have all these layers of fabric of who I am in this lifetime. And they, like you said, they cloud, it's that veil, they form that a cloud over who my soul is, right? And so what I find so I don't know, is if it's exciting or promising is that when I do communicate with someone who's passed, who had a troubled or a thick layer, a thick veil of conditioning of who I am, of wet blankets, maybe it's a, negative outlook or trauma, to be able to communicate with them and see the lightness and the freedom is pretty encouraging to me, and very beautiful. And it's lovely to be able to alleviate some pain,
Mm,
some emotional pain.
mhm.
Anyways, that's been a huge thing. But what I love is going back to like all of these studies where I this thirst for all these different kind of out of the box, the numerology, the Reiki, the mediumship. And like you said, everybody expresses it differently. It's like I it's so neat to be able to use all of these together in my reading, and just kind of like, I don't know. I There's no one way to do things. There's no one way to interpret. And it's nice to be able to find I think once you can find a way to express your spirituality, it's nice to be able to untuck.
Yes. So the way I describe this when I talk about this on this podcast is I talk about it is critical in your journey to discover the one or more languages to which your heart can hear and express the information to you. And for some of us, that information comes through. I mean, the reality is it's all energy. Energy doesn't speak
Yeah,
English or Arabic or
yeah,
Greek or French or whatever. The energy, the language of energy is the energy. But the messages that we as humans need to hear oftentimes can come through in any variety of languages, be that numerology,
yes,
astrology, Reiki, any other energetic modality. The reality that everything that you see and look at is some form of energetic expression. And so how we learn to extrapolate the big message into a language that our heart speaks, that we understand, that we can translate through, if you want to call it that, I think varies as we go. And I don't think it's any one thing. I mean, the truth is, we're here to be creative. And so part of the
yeah,
creativity is you don't have to have one language. Your
yeah,
creativity and your expression energetically, maybe it's through numbers, maybe it's through art, maybe it's through dancing, maybe it's all of it. I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe it's all
yeah.
of it.
It-
Uh,
And that's been the fun part, is figuring out, well, what's my language? What's my way?
mhm,
Because you hear these stories, or in studying mediumship and working with some amazing mediums who can literally see people right in front of their face or have conversations with them. When you don't see and you don't audibly hear things out loud, you doubt.
mhm,
But it was the moment we switched, and this is where you look at, when if you can have some sort of mentor, the moment we switched into, okay, take away the visual, take away the audio, and I want you to feel it, and I want you to know it. Well, that's when I started to shine, right? That's when
mhm,
things started to really take off, because gosh, my body is a tool.
mhm.
I feel things, and you see the patterns. You see that, oh, when this happens, this means this. As soon as you start to communicate with feeling, for me, that's how it works, which is so frustrating because no one else knows what I feel like. So how do I know if it's right? Right.
But you do, because you know
Well,
within your
you do.
body, this is my norm
Right.
feeling. And when it feels like
Right.
this, that's not
Right.
my norm. So therefore, it's coming from
Right.
somewhere. Where is it coming from?
Right. And so that's the thing. That's what happens. And that's what's so important about what I find with all of this stuff, especially with numerology too, is you have to know your chart. You have to know your baseline. You have to know your body. So what's been so refreshing is, as soon as I've started to really work this muscle, I started to realize, oh my gosh, I would go to the playground with my kids, or I would go to a concert, or I would go to, and I'd be out with people. Half the stuff I was feeling wasn't mine, wasn't even mine. So then because I was so distracted with the noise of life that you don't know what's yours and what's not yours. And so
Mhm.
it's there's that, it's almost like quieting everything down, figuring out who you are, and then you're like, oh, we can have fun with this.
So it's interesting. We
Like,
started this conversation at the top of at the top of the hour. We started the conversation with, well, during the pandemic, you get 2020 and all of a sudden you have all this time and space on your hands. Well, isn't it interesting that when you can get quiet, you can slow the chitter chatter in your head down, in your mind down, and you take a little bit of time and spaciousness to just be, the information starts to come through so
oh my
much
God.
clearer. Like instead of
Yes.
trudging through the fog or the mud, it's like, oh, I it's so clear to me now. The
Oh,
awarenesses come
yeah.
through. And that is the truth. I think that is also, so much the point behind people who say, well, I meditate daily or I do this daily or whatever their thing may be, the rituals that they have. It's not that you're sitting and trying to like silence everything out, but you're taking the moments to be in the moment. You're being in the
That's it.
moment. And when you're
That's
in the
it.
moment, you can hear, if you want to call it that, feel, whatever that
Yes.
is for you,
Yes.
convey, that can
Yes.
happen. Yeah.
You tweak your awareness, and so then you start seeing these, and you start, I'm never alone. I'm never alone. And it's funny, even as a kid though, I never felt alone. Like I could never undress because I knew someone was there. But now that I know that, that's probably because there were lots of spirits around. But 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 I think before this, I'm such a people person. I would always, if I was alone, I'd always make time to see like a friend, meet for coffee, go do something, chat. And then I started to get comfortable with my own company. And then you realize you're actually never really alone. Your soul, your spirit, you've
It's one
always
big
got
old
someone to
party,
communicate.
right? Like
Oh,
sometimes,
I I have
yeah.
full on conversations.
And sometimes you're kind of like, whoa, the room's a little crowded in here, man. Like I have
Yeah,
some days where I wake up and I feel like there's a whole room with me. I have other
yeah.
days where I don't quite feel there's that much, but I like you, I guess I never really can say, "Oh, I feel totally alone," because I don't ever really feel alone. That's a very different
And it's
statement. Now that we're
comforting.
talking about this, that's a very different statement than
Yeah,
feeling lonely. So to me, when someone says I feel alone, what that screams to me at a very core level, and again, here's my disclaimer to the listeners. This is my opinion. I'm not telling you it's got to be this way. This is my opinion I'm sharing with you. People who have the expression of I'm alone are what I refer to as spiritually bankrupt. They're missing the
yes,
boat. They're
yeah,
they may talk the talk, they may say they believe in XYZ, but there's a piece of the puzzle here that is missing, and the piece is true faith, trust, and belief.
yeah.
Because if you had that, you would know you're truly never technically alone. That's a very
Right,
different statement from I feel loneliness. And
right.
then to me, if the expression is I feel loneliness, of course, there's a piece of me that makes my heart break when I hear people say this, but there's also a piece of me that wants to say, and why? Because if you can dig behind the why, there's usually something in there that really
Right.
goes
Well,
back to something else.
yeah, it always does, right? And so that's where, well, that's what I found so comforting of the power of numerology is, and I look at numerology more as a reflective tool, as a
Mm,
more understanding the why of things. And I was going somewhere with that. I loved it. The I'm a feeling person. I feel everything, right? That's how I get my information, is literally feeling. And when I before I was when I it was noisy and I wasn't paying attention and I wasn't listening to myself, or I would identify as my feelings,
mm,
right? But then once you
mhm.
create that, once you get that space, you can get some space between you, your heart, and the feelings that your physical body is
Mhm.
telling you. So then you can go, okay, well, I am not lonely. I feel lonely. Then you can distance yourself and go, okay, well, why do I feel this way?
Yes.
And then it gives you, it's that zooming out, it's that gives you a little bit of perspectives. And if you're a feeling person, it's very difficult to separate the feeling from the identity, your identity.
I think for many people who are deep feelers, and of course, we have every phrase under the sun to offer to these folks. We call them empaths, we call them highly sensitive persons. Sometimes we call them introverts. We've got like a slew of labels that we like to put on people. And I'm going to say everybody has a potential capacity to experience that kind of feeling. Some people, it's a little more intense based on their coding, for sure. Some people
Yeah.
feel it more readily. I don't want to say they have it more. What I'm going to say is they have perhaps less boundaries to them so that
Yes.
it feels that much more intense. But I really feel that every okay, let's get a little here we go, folks. We're getting a little geeky. Get ready. So, to me, since everybody is a spark of love from the divine, therefore we are all put here with the same potential capacity for receivership and expression of said love. Those people who
Yeah.
take on their feelings and everybody else's feelings are, to
Yeah.
me, no, not that they hold more capacity, just that they have less protective boundaries about this is mine and this is yours. And so things get a little jumbled
Yes.
because they
Yes.
don't quite have that. I don't want to
Yeah.
say it's not really a fence, but you know what I mean? It's an awareness of
Mm,
this is mine and this is yours. But we
right. It's not
all
my
have it.
response.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we all have it. And
Well, yes.
it's learning that piece of my heart is not necessarily the feelings that are coming and going here. Maybe this is mine, but maybe this is not mine. And
Right.
to take a pause when you have that awareness, like, oh, I got that feeling, to take a pause and say, hold on a second. Let me really feel into this and assess, is this
Right.
really mine or not?
And how is this serving me?
Yes.
If it is mine, how is it serving me? What's it trying to tell me? What's it trying to teach me? When you're going back to your everybody's got the capacity, it's funny. This is how I described it to my child. I was trying to describe intuition. And I was like, okay, well, we're all iPhones. We're all phones. We're all devices. Our physical body is the device. Okay. There's a universal internet. It's everywhere. It's love, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, right? That's this universal internet. Our devices all have a Wi-Fi switch. We can all turn it on. Some people with it turned on, right? Some people were born with it turned on and they've got an amazing signal.
Hmm.
I had a signal, but I wanted to get a stronger signal. So how do you do that? That's the muscle. That's the building. So it's like if you take the humanness, if you take the emotions out of this and go, listen, we're just devices. We can all connect to this, whether you
Yes.
want to or not. And maybe you're in a bad signal. Maybe you've got no signal.
So
What do
here's
you
the
need to
thing.
remove?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what do you need to remove? Or do you need to reposition yourself, which I call
Yes.
realigning yourself. Align yourself
Yes.
such that you receive the signal frequency stronger.
Yes.
So, up here, of course, our signals cut in and out, take a right-hand turn on the road and you lose your signal. That doesn't mean there isn't going to be a signal. It means that I need to align myself to receive that signal. And that's
Yes.
exactly what we as humans work through in our lifetime. Those difficult vibrations that hold us back, that put the blankets on our heart, all the things that cause us to spend more time in our head than in our heart and not really hear it, and all the things,
Mhm.
that's the my signal's not working so great for me here. What do I need to do to align myself to
Right,
receive 4 or 5 bar signals so I can
right.
get my
And once you
messages?
receive it, right, and once you receive it, you get these messages, but you have to trust the messages. You
Mhm.
have to know how you're and it gets so annoying when I get really annoying when I do readings and I go, "Oh, you have to trust, you have to have faith," because you're like, "Sounds so cliche. It
It
sounds
sounds so
so."
simple, and it is so simple, but it is not easy. And here's why, because our
Yeah,
humanness interferes with our soul. So if you
yes,
said straight to the soul, "Do you have faith and trust in the divine?" The soul's going to say, "Well, no shit, Sherlock, that's where I come from. That is me.
yeah,
I
yeah,
am the divine and the divine is me and we are one and here you go." But
right,
your human goes, "Are you really so sure about that? Like I don't even know if that's really happening." So I there is a
right,
little piece of me that chuckles to think, isn't it interesting that we are brought here as souls dumped in a human body to have a human experience while we're hanging out on earth before we head off and go back to being soul sparks somewhere else. And yet we think we're so gosh dang amazing that we
I
can
know,
doubt trust and faith.
right.
It is a puzzlement to me. and
Well, and
I
it's funny.
it just
Yeah,
surprises me because I have doubt. I have doubt.
right, right,
I'm like, "Oh, I really wanna trust. I really wanna just, go with it." And then there's that little piece of my ego that says, "Okay, Mia, wait a second. Hold on. Are you really sure there?" And then you spend all your time having this conversation in your head like, "Stop talking. I'm trying to have a
right,
conversation with God here. Stop talking to me."
right.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I mean, as soon as I call it my meat puppet, okay? Beth Turner is my meat puppet. And
Right?
then as soon as you start doing that, meat puppet sounds so gross and so like silly. Then you start to go, gosh, stop taking her so seriously. She's literally doing the best she can. Then it comes a little bit more compassion, right? You make mistakes and you're like, oh man. So then I start going, oh, you silly. Before I used to just speak so poorly to myself and be so hard on myself. And it's like, you're just doing the best you can. You're here to learn. That's the whole point. And so why don't you make school, earth school, life school a little bit more fun? Stop taking it so seriously. So what classes do you want to take? Stop thinking you have to learn things the way it's outlined here.
And here's the
Or
kicker. You get to graduate
yeah,
from Earth School whether you have a 4.0 or a 2.0.
yeah, exactly.
Right? Because when they're done with you, you're getting kicked out of school, man, and off you go. Bye-bye.
Right. None of us are getting out of this alive,
Right.
right?
So whatever.
Yeah.
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 I
Oh,
think
this
I
is such
think
a good talk. Right?
it is. Well, it's so nice because you have these talks and then you realize, gosh, we just take it too seriously.
All of it.
Let's lighten up. Let's have a little bit more fun. And then as
All
soon
of
as you
it.
give yourself permission to lighten up and have a little bit more fun, then you're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, what does my heart want to do?
Mhm.
What turns my crank?
Mhm. And I think a lot of
So
times, and we'll sort of, wrap it up here, but I think a lot of what happens is our human gets hung up on all the little details. Well, what about this
yeah,
and what about that? And what if this doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? Well, what if I'm not successful? What if I can't live here? What if I don't make this kind of money? What if I all the what if,
right.
when I'm certainly not suggesting like don't go to school, don't get a job, and don't be like some kind of semi participating human in the collective. I'm not saying that, but I think we put a lot of weight on the details of it when
Yeah,
if we could just start to put the same kind of emphasis on living the moments with joy, fulfillment,
yeah,
passion,
yeah,
and really not hurrying through the moments,
right.
really enjoying the journey because it's a little Aerosmithy, like life is about the journey, not the destination. Thank you, Steven Tyler.
Yeah,
But the
yeah,
reality is everybody going the same destination.
Yeah.
We're all going to end up at the same train station at the end here.
Yeah.
So it's really
Yeah.
about, what would you like to see on your journey? What would you like to
Yeah.
do on your journey?
What are
Yeah.
you gonna do? Was that Mary Oliver with this wild and crazy life?
Yeah.
And then of course I love Trooper. So like we're here for a good time, not a long time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it
And
is
when you
true.
do things with passion, you do them well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, we were supposed to talk about the book. We haven't gotten to the book yet. So let's give a quick teaser on the book. Tell me what you're up to. I know that you're in the midst of it. It's not done yet. It won't be available for a little bit, but throw the
Mm.
listeners a little, like, get ready, because here it comes.
A little teaser. Well, it's a book, it's numerology. It's about the deck of cards, a regular deck of playing cards. Everybody has one. The regular deck, the deck that we all know, is pretty fantastic. It's pretty amazing. And it could be, if understood, it could be used as a tool to clarify, to understand, to get you to understand yourself. And so what this book is about, it's about the deck of cards. We go through each one from the Ace of Hearts all the way to the King of Spades. And we go through all the energetic pieces of it. I wrote it with 3 other women. So Jessica Serrato, and Karen Small and Daphne Wells, who's in New Zealand. And it's been a passion project we've done for over the last few years. And we're so excited. So it's in the publishing, we're in the editing stages right now. And it looks like it's going to be beginning of October. It's going to
But I'd like to be
be
on the
out.
pre-order list,
Yes, that's
please.
September.
Okay.
Yes.
And if I can figure out a way to get it done, I would like to have a signed copy, please.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
I
I'm
don't know
all
how
in.
y'all gonna do
We
that,
will.
but pick me. Ah!
I
It would be the
love it.
best.
So
It would be
it's
the best.
coming. It's coming. You can pre-order September 2024, and the
I'm
real
on it.
deal, it'll
I'm on
be,
it. I'm
yeah.
on it. So in the meantime, where do people find you, Beth? What's up? How do they
Um,
get you?
I know I'm subtle like my intuition. People can find me on Instagram, Intuitive Moxie 1111.
I
Intuitive
love
Moxie
it.
1111. And I just want to spread love and help and
Yeah,
add clarity and make people, I just love to make people feel better.
it's perfect.
So,
It's perfect.
yeah.
And the people who need that are going to find you. And the people
Yeah.
who want something different find whatever it is they need.
There's,
And I
yes,
think
there's
that is
plenty of us.
truly, I'll wrap it up here, but I think that is truly the difference between, yes, I do this because this is a passion of mine and I really want to be of service to the collective, versus, here's this little gimmicky thing I can, push and
Yeah.
sell to whoever. The folks who are really in it to be in it, to really be a conduit of love to the collective, it just happens. You get the people you need, it shows up. You don't have to push and, bull jam anybody. It just is. And I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that you took some time
Well,
today to chat with us. And
thank you for
such a
having me.
thrill.
Yeah.
Such a thrill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So good.
Well, thank you kindly.
Ah,
Thank you. I'm going to put all your contact.
okay.
I'll type it out, Intuitive Moxie 1111. I'll type it out in the show notes for folks. And, you can just put my name right down for the pre-buy, because I'll be all over that. And
Yes.
yes, and we'll do this again because it's just too much fun not to.
Yeah, I would love to. Actually, it'd be fun to do it with the other ladies with the book too.
I would love it. I'm going to reach
Yeah, yeah,
out
yeah.
to each of them, and maybe if I can figure out the IT end of it, let's do that. I think that would be
Yeah.
superb. Yeah,
Amazing.
perfect.